There's a lot to say about this reading, and it's good to start with what it is not. And if you're paying close attention, it's almost kind of shocking how Jesus would ever speak to someone this way. First ignoring them, and then saying it's inappropriate to give what belongs to the house of Israel, or to give the food of the children and throw it to the dogs, and then just all these things. It's like, what is Jesus doing? And some interpretations have been that, well, Jesus has had a rough day in ministry, and, we all have these moments where we snap or things like that. That's not what this is about at all. Ultimately, I'll go on more about this. This is an education piece, or it's a lesson he's teaching to his apostles about this woman's very deep and profound faith. It's also important to note, it begins with noting where it is. It's in the region of Tyre and Sidon, which is a place that is just outside, barely outside of the boundaries of Israel, of the land of Israel, at least at the time. In other words, it's a place where there are a lot of Jews who do live there, and those who aren't Jews are at least familiar with the Jewish people as well as many of their customs and things like that. It's also a very treacherous place, a very hot place. Maybe not as hot as here right now, but still up there, I guess. Anyway, so there's a symbolism there. We don't ever have to know the geography for the central message of a gospel, but it always is very interesting. Jesus is going to a place to preach his good news beyond just the house of Israel, even though he notes later in an educational way that he's there for the house of Israel. He's there to redeem the Jewish people. And of course, God has continuously spoken through the Jewish people in their laws, in their scriptures. And that is the way he has made his story known up to this point. And that's always been the plan. They are the chosen people. But his covenant goes beyond just them. His covenant goes to all of the Gentiles, all throughout the world. Gentiles meaning literally anyone who is not a Jew. Anyone throughout the world that is a human being and therefore created by God, created for a unique purpose, and also offered the chance for salvation from Jesus himself. So he's beginning to, it's fairly late in the gospel at this point, chapter 15 of Matthew. So we're getting to a lot of these themes of, reaching out to other nations of the world. And this woman is a Canaanite woman. That's also, this is a little bit more speculative, but many say that that genetically the Israelites were of the Canaanite people. That's where their origins were. Before Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, that's where they came from. So before Egypt, before all that, they are Canaanites by birth. But there, of course, are still Canaanites that are non-Jews. So the implication here, or at least it seems to imply, she is very, very close to the faith. She is very, very close to the house of Israel, but not in it, not just there. It's very important. And then we get to this dialogue, which again seems very offensive at first, and by worldly standards, I guess it is. First, she calls out to Jesus, look, my daughter's afflicted with a demon. Please come and help her. So we already notice her face. She believes that Jesus can solve this, and she believes she has to go to him for this. And he ignores her. It's like the opposite of pastoral charity, at least I'm told that, but he just completely ignores her at first, and then she keeps calling out. His disciples say, "Send her away, for she keeps calling out after us." And so personally, what the memories that this calls back to me are my time in Rome, and sometimes there are those that ask for money in major metropolitan cities, as you all know, and the Christian charity suggests we always presume that we can help somebody, we do what we can, but it's an objective fact. It's not always a good idea to just hand out money or to, some people it could be unsafe to speak to or be, things like that. You have to have kind of a balance of, wisdom about just the reality of the world, but also, Christian charity to help whoever you can. But still, there were times, I'm not proud to admit it, but I thought, well, I wish these things would just go away. I wish these problems would just go away. I've got class to go to. I've got things to do. I've got problems to solve. I don't have time and certainly not the money to help these people. So I don't know. That may have been somewhat of the sentiment these disciples had. Jesus, she's annoying us. Send her away. We can't be bothered with something like this. And it seems like it just gets worse and worse. And Jesus says to her, I was sent only to help the lost sheep of the house of Israel. In other words, I'm here to redeem Israel. I'm here to restore the covenant of Israel, the laws of Israel, right? The sacrifices of Israel. And we know it goes beyond that even at this point in the gospel, but that's what he says. Then he says to her, "It is not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." And that's almost like the last straw. You were likening her to a dog that doesn't deserve to eat food that belongs to the children of the house of Israel. Now, in a very literary sense, that is a reference to those outside of Israel, that they do not participate in temple worship, for example. You have to be of the Jewish faith to participate in temple sacrifice. That's always been a fact here, but that's what that's a reference to. Why would he do anything for her as a non-Jew, even if she's very, very close and very familiar to the Jewish people? But then her reply, again, is the central point of the lesson he's teaching his apostles, his disciples. "Please, Lord," calling him Lord, even though she's not a Jew, "for even the dogs eat the scraps that fall from the table of their masters." And this calls out to, even before this, well in the past, in the Old Testament, other nations have remarked of how great of a God Israel is, even if they don't necessarily believe in the same God. Their gods in large part are, they're multiple. They're very violent, very self-centered. It's filled with all these dramatic stories about things like that. And other nations have remarked for centuries, wow, the God of Israel is loving, is good. There's a oneness of God. There is a centrality of love in God. That God is love. That God created out of love. None of the other gods are like that. Again, regardless of what they believe, there is already a reputation about who God truly is and how great He is among the Jewish people. This woman knows that and goes to Jesus knowing there's something special about Him. And yes, He has already performed miracles and his reputation is spreading, but she goes to Him knowing that He can do something for her. So He says, "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." That kind of somewhat calls out to some Marian themes, right? Let it be done unto me according to your word. Things like that as well. But again, I argue this is a lesson He's teaching to His apostles, that here is somebody who, despite not really being formed in the Jewish tradition, maybe some familiarity with it, recognizes at a very natural level who Jesus is, knows that He can help her, and has tremendous and unshakable faith in Him. And even though the disciples try to push her away, even though they do not recognize her great faith, she still, even though the Lord Himself tests her faith with several of these comments that we would think, He knows her faith, He knows her heart, so that's why He's able to do this, and we shouldn't necessarily take this approach, as we reach out to people, but He shows them her faith. So I say this kind of three practical things I would say this means. One is that we always have to turn to Jesus. Always the answer is Jesus. We might think, well, it's our own strength, or, well, I just need to have a deeper trust in God in the very vague and abstract sense. And yes, of course we should trust God. But God gave us the incarnate Word that is His Son to trust, to know, to have a relationship with, to get to know at a deeper level. And this woman gives us an example by, it's not that she comes to Him first and says, Lord Jesus, my daughter's afflicted with a demon. By the way, I'm an expert in business, or I'm a very educated individual, or these things. Or she doesn't display any of this. She displays her weakness before God, and even her weakness before the rest of the church. Not only is that able to be a lesson for them, but Jesus is able to save her because of her faith. That's first and foremost. We always have to go to Jesus first. Jesus is always the answer, and a personal relationship with Jesus where we can give this to Him is always the answer. Secondly, we have to be willing to bear our weakness. It is not our strength, and actually I'm going to do the third point first, I think this time. But the third point is we need to change our framework of mind, or our frame of mind in regard to our mission. Oftentimes, and we're in a worldly sense, we get focused on groups, our own cliques, our own way of doing things. And as the church, what are we called to be? Are we called to be something that is insular and pays attention to ourselves, does our own thing, does the same thing we've known for time and time again over the years? And the answer, of course, is a resounding no. What is a parish? And many would rightly say, well, it's a parish church, and that's exactly what this building is. It is the parish church of Sacred Heart of Jesus. That is absolutely true. And yes, we have other buildings, that we do other apostolates and other missions out of. Yes, of course, all of that is true. But is Sacred Heart limited to 101 Cotton, 106 Exchange, whatever the address of this building is? I pay the bills, but I don't always, there's like 7 of them, so I try my best. But is it just this block in this part of the city? And the answer is no. And I know that, of course, there's St. Catherine's for the Spanish language, Diddy we have for the university, but it is under our care that we preach the gospel, that we exercise the mission of the church in all of Emporia, and not just to Catholics. Every single soul that lives within those boundaries is not just an opportunity, it is our responsibility. That's a huge deal. And one you might think, well, why would Jesus ever entrust that to us? Well, good question. I don't exactly have an answer to that. I don't know why he would trust me with anything, let alone all of us with such a great and huge responsibility of preaching the good news and also witnessing effectively to them. Now, of course, that's where grace comes in. That's where the scriptures come in. We have tools at our disposal to do that. But regardless, it is our responsibility. Just as it was the responsibility of the house of Israel, once Jesus came, to reveal everything that they had been taught about God, about his wisdom, about his many covenant promises throughout the centuries. That was what they were able to share with all corners of the earth. And it wasn't just the surrounding nations that were able then to say, oh, wow, the God of Israel is great. You know, these Christians, they really know what they're talking about. They really have a hope that has transformed them. Clearly they believe, more than just in a narrative sense, clearly they believe that this has changed their lives completely. That is what people are able to say about us. Again, this woman, for all we know, she may know tons of things about the faith. She may be wildly intelligent or talented. We don't really know much about her other than the way that she was revealed, or the way that God's power was revealed in her was in her faith, in her willingness to trust Jesus, in her willingness to bring this before, even in the presence of the other apostles, the other disciples. She was still willing to share this. So let us discern then, what does this mean for our lives? Now, we may not be like St. Paul, all of us actually, very few people are called to that. Most of us are not called to give up everything that we own, go to a foreign land where we don't know the language or the custom or anything, and risk everything, even in Paul's case, imprisonment and shipwreck and all the other things he details. We are not called, for the most part, to things like that. There may be some who are. But sometimes the Lord is inviting us to think ourselves, like, what is right in front of me? Where are the opportunities in my own life to be a better witness to the faith? Even through my weakness, even through showing people that, yes, I have these these issues even, or these faults from the past, or things I know I still need to reconcile, but I'm trusting in Jesus and it's working. For example, do I have godchildren who I can share the faith with at a deeper level? Perhaps maybe I bought them a rosary for baptism. Great, things like that. But do I take an active role in sharing the faith with them? As that is my responsibility in the life of the church. That's something I promised I would do at that baptism. At work or at school, and I know it's not always possible to explicitly, reference the faith or talk about it in depth, but I would say, again, I don't live in this world as much as you do, but there's always a way to offer some sign that you are a Christian, that you have, and not just that, but that you have Christian hope. That your joy comes from your faith, that your joy rests in the person of Jesus Christ. I think there's always a way to show that some form or another, but we have to discern it. So brothers and sisters, remember those 3 things. Come to Jesus first, have an outward mentality, and take the opportunities that are in front of us to share the faith more deeply and with greater love.